With the presidential election behind us, what's the mandate for Donald Trump? So here to break it all down with us is BlazeTV host Stu Burguiere, who's filling in for Matthew Peterson. So Stu, I want to put you on the hot seat since we have you here today and just talk about what has been happening over the weekend, right? We're still riding the high from the Trump victory. So what are the next steps here for Donald Trump?
I mean, it's been a great week. I think the first steps for us is just to kind of celebrate a little bit and have a few days. I kind of did that this weekend. Like, it was kind of nice to have good news for once after the election hell we went through for all that time, and finally came out on the other side with some good news. And now you kind of step back and you realize it's time to immediately go back to work, right? Like, there's no real delay here. If you think about the way that a presidential term begins, and this is something we have to kind of think about this early. You have, your first 100 days where you have that sort of grace period, and people will kind of let you do stuff that they wouldn't normally do. You'll have one reconciliation bill because of the way the Senate is set up. Assuming the House comes through, which we do think it will, you'll have one Senate bill where you can get 50 votes, and that has to do something with the budget. Usually with Republicans, it's some sort of tax cut. Probably have some other stuff jammed in there as well. And then you get into year two. And year two is a situation where every smarmy Republican from a purple district is going to say they can't do anything. So really, you have that first 6 months to a year to get everything you want to get done. You have to move fast. Usually what happens in that first midterm election, bad things. This is usually and this is just historically, it happens to almost everybody. You lose the House or the Senate. You usually lose some of your majority if you have one. It's not normally positive, just because people usually push back against whatever direction you're going in. So you got 2 years, you got to make it count. And you were looking at the way Donald Trump is coming out of the gate here. He knows that. Like, he went through this once. He's not going to let any of those problems happen again. He's going, he's putting the pedal to the metal here.
The man is churning out videos like no one's business right now. It's not just like, oh, I'm going to say I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. And one of his big things is promises made, promises kept, right? And that was one of the things that he was very good at back in his first administration, is doing what he said he was going to do. It was almost shocking to see a politician do that. But now, Stu, like every single day, we're getting new Donald Trump videos of where I'm going to make sure like that gender affirming care isn't happening in the United States. I'm going to make sure like the Department of Education is gone. Like, there are so many big things that he's already saying. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I think this is a smart approach too from Trump, in that like he's realizing how we are as people, right? Like there was an artist I used to follow that used to release one song per month. And I remember thinking, like, that's the best approach. Like, instead of giving me a 3-year wait and then I get an album, one song per month. You're always kind of expecting, you're always kind of engaged with the artist. I always liked that approach. And what Trump is doing here is not giving you like the State of the Union, here's 9,000 proposals that no one's going to remember. He's giving these things in sort of like bite-sized chunk videos where he's hitting, a bunch of things that are related, things that he wants to do, and things that he's clearly been thinking about for a while. It's interesting. Normally, when you become president, you have an ongoing list of ideas you want to accomplish, and then you're hit in the face with life. You're hit in the face with the realities of being president. And a lot of times that's taking you off kilter. I mean, certainly Donald Trump did not get into office to deal with pandemic response, right? That was not why he did it. And, George W. Bush didn't get into office to try to deal with 9/11. Like, these things hit you, and all of a sudden your entire presidency changes into something else. He's coming in here realizing that could happen at any time. He's come in here with proposals. He's had an entire term off to think about them, to align the people he thought would be best in these roles. And now he can kind of come in here with his feet kind of moving, running, and getting started before one of these realities of a presidency gets in his way. And I this is what you'd hope he would do. And it seems like he's on target for this. He's got to get the right people in. He's got to make sure he gets the House. There's a lot there, but he's in the right direction, I think.
All the best people. He's going to get all the best people. Now, RFK Jr. and Elon Musk, Elon specifically, has basically just been hanging out at Mar-a-Lago since Election Day, according to my sources and CNN. So they're making sure that the transition team kind of goes the way that they wanted it to go. What have you been looking at with the transition team, and where do you want to see some of these next steps move?
Well, you brought up two interesting possibilities. I would say they diverge dramatically in my mind. So one is Elon Musk. And I would say of any of the things going on right now, my high end like excitement comes from Elon Musk the most. Musk is, and I read his autobiography when it came out. When was it, last year? And because I knew about him, you knew the things that he was doing, but like I didn't know, granular detail about his life. And like he's an interesting guy in that I think working for him would be pretty stressful, especially if you were not like his favorite person. There was a lot of incidents of him coming in and just like blowing out entire departments and looking at the very technicality of the rule to get something done. One of my favorite stories was he was on the line to report some level of Tesla production. And I think it was Model 3. And he was way behind, and they were flying drones over his factories to see how many he could pump out in a day, and they were shorting his stock, and he was getting pissed about this. So he went and he found a loophole in the law that allowed places that deal with auto and manufacturing and even repair to open up temporary tents outside to do like specials. Like, we're going to do a special $29 oil change. We can put a tent out. So he built like the world's largest tent and put an entire factory outside under the tent so he could hit those production goals and burn all the people shorting the company. He's that kind of thinker. And that approach as applied to the U.S. government is like thrilling to me. The fact that he might come in and do that and say, you know what, sometimes you need to fire entire departments. He's the type of person who really does that. On the other side, RFK Jr., I'm not as excited about. I don't necessarily need...
You don't want to be healthy?
You know what? From the federal government, no. I really, I think you can agree with everything RFK Jr. says about food. Yeah. I don't want a centralized government trying to, quote unquote, make me healthy. Let me choose what I want to eat. That being said, if he stays around away from the environment and he makes recommendations and says, hey, here's the new food pyramid, whatever, I don't care. I think it's important for Trump to make sure his fingerprints are all over what someone like RFK Jr. is doing, because it's a lifelong Democrat. I mean, I'd say apply the same thing to Tulsi Gabbard. Gabbard is someone who I like a lot more than RFK Jr., but also she ran Bernie Sanders' campaign in Hawaii. Like, we have to make sure that we're watching all these things going on. I think Trump is all over that, though.
Well, Trump has named his border czar. It's Tom Homan, and here he is on 60 Minutes. Take a look.
We have seen one estimate that says it would cost $88 billion to deport 1 million people a year.
I don't know if that's accurate or not.
Is that what American taxpayers should expect?
What price do you put on national security? Is that worth it?
Is there a way to carry out mass deportation without separating families?
Of course there is. Families can be deported together.
Well, that's one way of doing it.
I freaking love that clip.
Right.
I love it.
But that, Stu, to set the tone, right? Oh, this is the guy that I'm going to make sure is in charge of the border czar position, speaks volumes.
It really does. And, you could do a lot with tone, actually. I mean, it's funny. If you go back to 2017, Donald Trump comes in and his tone is different than everybody else, right? His tone is, we're going to stop the, illegal immigrants from coming across the border. We're going to deport those that are here. You're not wanted here, essentially. Like, we love you. If you are illegal immigrants, please come, make our country better. We love that. But if you're an illegal immigrant, you're not wanted here. That was his tone. And tone works for a while, right? It doesn't solve the problem long term, but it does send a message, hey, like, this is not what you wanted. You notice in the Trump administration, he wasn't able to get all of his border stuff done. And of course, he'll never be able to get all of it done. But if he can get a good chunk of it done and lock that in for a time period that will hopefully last between not only his administration or maybe a Vance or a DeSantis administration after it, you can make a massive difference in this problem. What we saw with Biden was the opposite, right? We saw a tonal change, even though some of the rules didn't even change. Many of them did. But the tone change was, you're welcome here. We want you here. And of course, people are smart enough to get that sense. And they come and they say, they get that message. They come across the border. They change our entire society. They create a lot of economic harm, among other things. So I think Trump can start this right off the bat. This problem will get a lot better just by him being in office and talking. And then, when people like this are in charge of implementing the policy, these aren't, the typical Republicans who are like, oh, what we really want is a comprehensive border reform where everyone gets to come across and do whatever they want. This is somebody who actually cares about the border and wants to lock it down from illegal immigrants. And if we can do that, you're going to have, I think, a really positive change, not only with the problem with crime, but also economically.
I love that you're talking about the tone and you're just throwing out there. You can tell we're still riding the high of the Trump victory because you're like, you know what? When we get to the J.D. Vance or Ron DeSantis administration, we haven't even gotten to the Donald Trump one. It's not even January of 2025 yet, but we're going to be riding that high as long as we can because we don't get to do that very often.